Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Straight Up With Steph. Before I tell you what we're talking about today, I want to give you a little personal story. And typically on my podcast episodes, I don't talk too much about myself because really it's about the guest. But my experience that I've had starting last year inspired me to make this episode. So let me tell you, about a year and a half ago, I started getting some really weird symptoms. And throughout my life, I haven't had any like chronic medical issues or really had anything like quote unquote wrong with me. So for me to have a bunch of random symptoms at once that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks really made me wonder what the hell is going on. These symptoms really did seem to happen overnight and they were extremely disruptive in my life up until recently. So almost a year and a half, I've been dealing with this stuff. All of a sudden, I turned from a good sleeper into someone who woke up at 3 a.m. and couldn't go back to sleep, therefore making me really tired and really irritable for the rest of the day. My hair started falling out. I was having issues with my skin. I developed this almost, I don't want to say crippling, but like almost crippling anxiety where I had never struggled with that before. I did not know what severe anxiety felt like until then. I couldn't concentrate. I thought that maybe I had ADHD or something. And for someone who's trying to run a business, that is not cool, not to be able to concentrate. I also couldn't remember anything. I was starting to forget really important things that had to do with my business, or I was just getting super scatterbrained in my personal life, which was embarrassing, but also it was concerning. I thought that I was developing early onset dementia or Alzheimer's. I experienced pretty decreased motivation to where I would wake up in the morning and I would dread everything that I had to do that day. And it was just hard for me. It was like a struggle just to get through the day. I had fatigue, which I'm sure was because of lack of sleep, but it felt like more than that, where I would have to sit down on the couch or lay down on the couch for a few minutes to kind of rest and then get back up and do what I was doing. I'm the kind of person who gets a ton of shit done during the day. I'm able to work out hard and not really suffer from that. And all of a sudden, I was like suffering from stuff that I had been doing normally up until then. I did not know what was going on, but I didn't feel good mentally or physically. It took me a while to figure it out, but then I was like, holy shit, I'm in menopause. That's what this is. Everything fits. And I had a surgery a little over 10 years ago that they told me because of that surgery, you're probably going to experience early menopause. But that was over 10 years ago. I didn't really think much of it. But then I remembered when I was going through all this. What do we do when we start experiencing weird symptoms? We call our doctor, right? I went into the doctor. I gave him my whole list of symptoms, asked for some blood work to check on my hormones. My blood work came back, quote unquote, normal. So his advice to me was, you're a woman. This is a natural part of life. Here are some antidepressants. I didn't realize this at the time, but now I know this is a very common way of the medical industry treating women who go through menopause, minimizing symptoms, telling us we need to get used to it, and prescribing us antidepressants, which I'm sorry, antidepressants are being shown now really not to work and they cause a whole bunch of side effects. So why am I going to take that? I really had a problem with him telling me that I need to get used to it and this is my new normal because I have hopefully 40 or 50 years left in my life. What? So I'm just going to feel like shit for the rest of my life? Like, I'm not okay with that. Long story short, I have gone through several different medical providers up until recently who, again, have not listened to me, have gaslit me, and have wanted to put me on antidepressants. I did have one that agreed to start me on an estrogen patch, and that helped with, I was getting hot flashes and night sweats too, which was not pleasant. So the estrogen helped with that and helped with some of the anxiety, but I was still having all of these other symptoms. I couldn't remember anything. I was super scatterbrained and I really just didn't have the desire to do anything, either personally or professionally anymore. I finally found a clinic, who listened to me, listened to all of my symptoms. They did do blood work, but they treat the symptoms, not what the number says on the piece of paper, because blood work for hormones is like not really the best thing to go by. And then I got started on testosterone treatment. Testosterone is just as important for women as it is for men. And for some reason, it's very difficult for women to get it. I don't understand why. They told me it would take 4 to 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks for me to feel anything. I felt something within that first week. I've been on it for not even 3 weeks now, and I feel like a different person. I feel like the old me. I have energy. My brain is working better. There's still some things that aren't quite normal yet, but I'm hoping that it's just going to get better as time goes on. But I have that desire back to work. I have the motivation. I have the energy, both professionally and personally. So I really feel like the old me. And let me just tell you, menopause is something that will affect 100% of us, either directly or indirectly. Half of us, if we live long enough, will go through it. And it is a natural part of life, but that doesn't mean that we're meant to suffer through it. And if you're not experiencing menopause, you know someone who will go through it. This is a huge transition period in a woman's life. And for whatever reason, there is so much stigma attached to it, like we're not allowed to talk about it, or it's embarrassing or something. There's misinformation, there's mistreatment for the medical profession, and they're going off of really either outdated or flat out incorrect studies that have been done, which hinder women's access to adequate medical treatment, like getting hormone replacement therapy. I want to do my own small part in raising awareness about this because if you're experiencing any of the symptoms that I just mentioned, you feel alone because, like I said, the stigma just makes it to where you almost can't talk about it, which is bullshit, in my opinion. And I wanted to find someone who really knows their stuff about hormones and menopause. I know a thing or two now, but certainly not enough to educate people. And I found her. When I was looking for someone to interview for the podcast, I started on Instagram, just looking for people who create good content, who really are just focused on educating people, and someone who I think I would enjoy talking to. Her name is Shirley. She is the founder of MenopauseChicks.com, and she puts out such great, to the point, concise information about hormones and menopause. We talked today about what the difference is between menopause, perimenopause, and postmenopause, and the age ranges of when that usually happens. And then we talk about the signs and symptoms that somebody might be entering into that menopause transition. We talk about hormone therapy that can help, and also some lifestyle factors that can help as well. As we get older, I'm realizing that our margin of error is getting smaller and smaller and smaller with things. And there's a lot that we can do, hormones or not, that really support our hormone health and our overall health. Hormones such as testosterone and estrogen aren't just important for like men or women or just sex hormones. They really have so many functions throughout the body. And we break those down today as well. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Shirley. Hello, Shirley. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me. Nice
I
to
have
meet you.
been, you too. Yes. I feel like I kind of know you because I stalk you on Instagram. um, but I know it's kind of how it is. But I have been looking forward to this episode ever since you said yes. And I
Okay.
know a little bit about you, but for those listening, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. My name is Shirley Weir, and I am the founder of Menopause Chicks. I am 57 years old. I reached menopause when I was 49, and I have been researching this topic since, I don't know, like it's probably 15 or 16 years now, maybe even longer. I think I was
I
39 actually when I started to get really curious about perimenopause. And then just before my 50th birthday, I realized that what I had started with Menopause Chicks needed to become my full-time vocation. So yeah,
Wow.
I love what
And
I do.
that's kind of how these things work, right? It's like we
Yeah.
have a personal experience with something, and then, I mean, I'm sure that you noticed all of the misinformation
Yeah.
and confusion around this, and you just, yeah, you have a mission, which I very much appreciate. So you mentioned perimenopause, and I would like to just get some definitions out of the
Definitions.
way. So,
Love
what
it.
is the difference between perimenopause, postmenopause, and then how old usually do those happen?
Great way to start. So, menopause is an umbrella term that usually covers, well, it can cover women's reproductive health from age, let's say 35 till the end of time. But technically, menopause is one day. It's the end of ovulation. It's when the last egg follicle has been developed, but we never know when that happens. So we use 12 period-free months as the sign that we have reached menopause. So Menopause is one day. It's the end of ovulation, the end of reproduction, the end of menstruation. And the phase of life leading up to that day is called perimenopause. Peri, the prefix, means around. So it's very nuanced. It's different for everyone. And really, perimenopause is defined by age. If you use that around menopause, so no one knows, but let's say it's 5 to 7 years leading up to perimenopause, and it could be different for everyone. One of the analogies that I will use for perimenopause is if you think about puberty, the day that someone gets their first period, changes happen before that, maybe 2-3 years before. There are noticeable changes, even though that person might not be ovulating yet. And so perimenopause is the opposite end of that hormone teeter-totter. And then once we reach menopause, and the average age that's still reported in North America is 51.2. I mentioned that I was 49. I work with a number of women every single day who are 58, 59. So I think that the average age is probably climbing, but I honestly don't know who's measuring it. Every day after menopause for the rest of our lives is postmenopause.
Okay. And from what I've learned, so I started, well, it's difficult for me because I had a hysterectomy. So I
Okay.
don't have that to go
Okay.
by.
Okay.
But I started having some pretty significant symptoms when I was 41
Okay.
last year. And from what I've read and learned, it's like I used to think that menopause was something way off, like 60 years old, maybe I'd have to worry about it. But
Mhm.
from what I'm reading, depending on the person, they could experience symptoms as early as like their mid 30s, which is so much younger than what I thought.
Yeah, so it kind of depends because the next thing that we have to define then is symptoms of what. So, for me, my early disruptive symptoms, if you will, were sleep deprivation, brain fog, even some rage with my children that really upset me and scared me. And at the time, in my, early 40s, I thought that I wanted to blame perimenopause for all of that. The wisdom of getting older and the benefit of having a rear view mirror, plus all of the research and education I've been exposed to, has taught me that, yeah, my hormones might have been fluctuating in my early 40s, but predominantly that was cortisol, that was
Mm.
stress, that was insomnia unchecked, right? And it was symptomatic of a lifestyle that probably a lot of your listeners can relate to because I was self-employed, had 2 small kids. My 80-year-old mother was living with us. She was showing signs of cognitive decline. I was waking up every day at 3 a.m., telling myself a story that went like this. Oh, Shirley, you're gifted. You can work for 4 hours before your children wake up. That will make things easier for everybody, right? And I'm using air quotes. And the truth is that we can do that because we are strong and human beings, but we can't do that chronically. And I did. And
Okay.
so, you know, those are my experiences. Yes, progesterone is the first hormone to decline in perimenopause. It does impact our mood and our sleep and our bleeding. And 2 things can be true at the same time. So you might be noticing changes in your early 40s or mid 30s, as you identified. That is definitely possible. And more often than not, there will be a couple of other layers of things that are happening at the same time.
Okay. So, yes, there could be hormonal changes, but, and you talk about this on your Instagram page. It's like you can't just jump automatically to that.
Yeah.
Like, look at your lifestyle, look at diet, sleep, all of that. So, what are some symptoms, though, of perimenopause that someone should maybe pay attention to?
Yeah. So I don't use perimenopause and symptoms in the same sentence. And
Okay.
the reason why is kind of just what I was saying a couple minutes ago is I want to make sure that we don't miss an opportunity to treat the root cause of something else. Okay. So if you were on Instagram today, and if your listeners, are listening to this, the algorithm will probably send them a bunch of other messages around menopause in the coming days and weeks. You'll see things such as 34 and 42 and 78 symptoms of menopause, and none of that is true. What's really true is that we have symptoms of progesterone decline in perimenopause. That's the hormone that it kind of does a slow ascend during our reproductive years and then a slow decline into perimenopause. We also have symptoms of estrogen fluctuation. And estrogen kind of does, before it ends in postmenopause, it does a bit of a and for some people, it does a lot of a roller coaster, right? It can be quite wild and quite disruptive. So in our reproductive years, progesterone is high and estrogen is fairly constant. And then in perimenopause, those two can switch. And those symptoms that would show up of progesterone decline and or estrogen fluctuation would look like mood swings, sleep disruption, changes to bleeding. Periods might get shorter, they might get longer, they might get lighter, and for many women, they get heavier. And that can wreak havoc on our quality of life. And then above and beyond that, some other common experiences in perimenopause might be PMS for the first time in your life. Maybe you've never experienced it, and now you're kind of really sensitive to those, just before your period. Breast tenderness can show up, and I had that, and I was like, there's no way I'm pregnant, right? But that was the first thought that went into my mind. And then for some of us, we might experience feelings of anxiety and feelings of depression that we are not used to or accustomed to. And that doesn't mean that you have a clinical diagnosis of an anxiety disorder or depression, but you might have those feelings and it's quite upsetting to experience that for the first time.
I agree. That was one of my first ones, was like this intense anxiety. And I was like, what the heck is happening here? So once someone starts to just feel, because it's like only a woman knows their body and they know when things aren't normal. So when someone starts to feel that, should they talk to their doctor? Or is there blood work that can maybe confirm what's going on?
Yeah. So talking to your doctor is maybe a good first step. But in this country, in Canada, where we're speaking from today, 54% of women leave their health appointments feeling dismissed or disappointed. That number is significantly higher for Indigenous women and women of color. And the top two reasons for those visits are menstruation and menopause. Now, I am not here to deter you from talking to your doctor, but you used the word first. And so I would say the very first thing that all of us need to do is to remember that our last health class was probably in 7th grade. And many of us haven't had a health class in that time, even though we may have given birth multiple times and, grew up decades later. And so the best thing we can do is learn how our hormones work when cycles are regular, so that we can be in the best possible position to drive our own health bus and make really informed, confident health decisions when cycles are no longer regular. And of course, everyone's experience is going to be different. If you are experiencing heavy bleeding, if you have something that's very disruptive to your health, absolutely surround yourself with a health team, talk to your doctor. But I say the more informed you can walk into that appointment, the better the experience will be.
How would you recommend someone becoming informed? And I read your ebook, by the way, on the plane. I was on a plane recently. And I was just like enthralled, because so much of what you said I can identify with. But there was so much useful information, from supplements to sleep to hormones to anyways. So I assume that's a good resource, but what would you recommend for someone who just wants to become more informed?
Yeah, so I did write a book that's very easy to digest. It's quite short and it's free for everyone. So you can get it at menopausechicks.com. And the book is laid out. I mean, it tells my narrative and my sister's narrative, but it's really about like what we're doing today. These are the definitions, these are the common experiences, and then these are all of your options. And when we get to the option part, often conversations like this and podcasts like this we'll quickly go to a conversation around hormone therapy, which is the first line recommended treatment for all women by all menopause societies throughout the world. But it's very individualized because we're all at different ages and stages when we're having these hopefully proactive conversations, but in many cases they're reactive. And then when conversations quickly jump to hormone therapy, that's where all of those other elements come into play, like lifestyle and stress management and missing anything nutritionally. And I'll just try to give you a quick example. When I have conversations in the Menopause Chicks community about hormone therapy, one of the misinterpretations by women at large is that it will be a magic wand. It will fix everything. And so I need everyone to know that hormone therapy is approved for 3 things, and it might have some side benefits in addition to that. So hormone therapy is approved for the treatment of vasomotor symptoms, which is the proper term for hot flashes and night sweats. And we didn't mention that when we were talking about perimenopause, but the majority of vasomotor symptoms are experienced in the last 1 to 2 years of perimenopause. And that can be quite confusing for women who still have a period or whose period is irregular. And they're like, I still have a period, but I'm getting hot flashes. Is this something I need to address? So the answer is yes. So hormone therapy is approved for the treatment of vasomotor symptoms, the prevention of bone loss, and we lose approximately 20% of our bone mass in the first 5 to 6 years of postmenopause alone.
Oh, that's scary.
When estrogen declines, we lose 20%, and then we don't get that back. So hormone therapy is part of a bone health plan. It's not a magic wand, but you have to look at nutrition as well as strength building exercise and hormone therapy. I like to think of it as a 3-pronged approach. And then the third thing that hormone therapy is approved for is our genitourinary health, which includes vulva and vagina and urethra and bladder and the overall pelvic floor. Some side benefits from hormone therapy that is not approved for, but many women do experience, which is, if they take progesterone, for example, it supports mood and sleep, and it helps to regulate bleeding. So progesterone is one form of hormone therapy that can be initiated in perimenopause, if that is something that is, a challenge for you. Now, outside of that, I created this inverted pyramid, which you probably saw in the book. And the reason that came to be is because I don't want everyone jumping to hormone therapy thinking that every adverse health experience is related to estrogen and progesterone. And the common example I'll share right now is iron deficiency. So if you have a period, there's a really good chance that you are low in ferritin. And ferritin is the measure of blood stores in our blood, iron stores in our blood, sorry. And you might not be anemic, but you might be anemic. So it's really important that you have your ferritin level checked. Then if you get closer to the, perimenopause, the end of perimenopause, and you're experiencing heavy bleeding, there's a really good chance that you might be iron deficient. And that shows up in things that we see on all the memes on Instagram that blame menopause. So hair loss, fatigue, exhaustion. Show me a woman who doesn't feel fatigued and exhausted right now. And the first thing I want us all to check is our iron. So we could go through the whole hormone therapy process, and we should get curious about that. but I just don't want us to miss an opportunity to treat something like iron deficiency or a thyroid condition or another nutritional or health condition.
Are those tests that you just mentioned with the iron and thyroid too, are these tests that if you go to see your doctor with these concerns, they would automatically write for you, or is that something you have to ask for?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I advocate on women's behalf, so I would never leave it up to the doc. Like, I would never tell someone, oh, if your doctor mentions it. No, it's your job to have that on your list and
Mhm.
to make sure that that is part of your dialogue at your health appointment. So, but getting a requisition for ferritin to be tested or for thyroid should be super easy. And I personally believe it should be something that is part of a annual women's health appointment.
I mean, yeah, we can talk about what things should be on there all day,
Yeah.
right? But it is our responsibility to just be educated and ask for these things.
The interesting thing about iron, if I could just go on that
Yeah.
tangent for a second, the interesting thing about iron is that we do need in most provinces, we need a doctor to requisition it, but we do not need a prescription to supplement our iron. So if you are bleeding, if you are experiencing heavy bleeding, or if you eat primarily vegetarian or a vegan lifestyle, you should be considering an iron supplement as part of your health plan.
Okay. And I remember reading that in your ebook about iron because I have had issues. My hair it's slowed down a little bit, but it has fallen
Really?
out. Yes, very thin here in the front now. And I was just
Wow.
like, oh my God. So I'm gonna get that checked out.
Okay.
But going back to hormone replacement
Yes,
therapy, for people who don't know what that means,
sure.
like what is it and how is it administered? Like how does that work?
Okay. So used to be called hormone replacement therapy. We don't use the word replacement anymore, except for a younger woman who might have both her ovaries removed prematurely.
Mhm.
That would be a form of replacing hormones to a level that she needs at her age and stage. Menopause hormone therapy is the term that I talk about the most, which is might begin in perimenopause, but definitely needs to be investigated postmenopause. So menopause hormone therapy primarily refers to two types of hormone therapy. One, systemic, which you would take to benefit your whole body system. And the second is vaginal, which you would take just to benefit. It's also called localized hormone therapy, which means it benefits where you put it, stays where you put it.
Okay. So
Okay.
vaginal doesn't necessarily like affect the whole system.
It does not.
Okay.
There might be a minuscule amount that crosses into the blood barrier, but not enough to treat
Okay.
anything. Okay.
Okay.
So, hormone therapy, primarily menopause hormone therapy, it consists of estrogen, and our ovaries make three types of estrogen, but the estrogen that we give back to our body post-menopause is called estradiol. Can be administered through oral, but that's not the first recommendation. The ideal recommendation is to take it transdermally. So you would either apply it to your skin via a gel, a cream, or a patch. And then estrogen also needs progesterone, and progesterone is best taken orally.
Okay.
Okay. And then vaginal hormone therapy can be estrogen or it can be DHEA, which is another hormone. And it's best described as a bit of a magic hormone in that when DHEA is applied to the vagina, the body automatically converts it to the estrogen and testosterone that we need.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Please don't ask me how that happens.
I won't. I
Just
wouldn't
believe in
understand it
magic.
anyway.
Just believe in the magic. But
Okay.
most of the women I know are using vaginal estrogen therapy, and that can be applied vaginally through a number of different ways too. So a suppository, or a cream or a ring, like a ring that you would insert and leave.
So if someone is just using it vaginally, is that to treat like dryness or if someone's having pain with sex? Or
Yes. So,
okay.
what can go on? What can impact our genitourinary health includes vulva and vaginal dryness. So, that happens for two reasons. One, our bodies make something called hyaluronic acid, which was not invented by the beauty industry, but it's a molecule that our body makes on its own. And that starts to decline in our 30s and in our 40s. And so all of our skin is impacted by that decline in hyaluronic acid. So is our eyes and our mouth and our joints and our vaginas. And then when we reach menopause, which let's say the average age is 51, estrogen goes for that steep decline. The vagina feels the impact of that. So does our skin, so do our eyes, so do our mouth, so do our joints. But most women who have the privilege of living long enough will experience a change to the skin tissues of the vulva and the vagina. So much so that the vagina might atrophy, which means any muscle can get smaller, like our biceps, if can get shrink in size as well. But the vagina, you can experience vaginal atrophy. And then the urethra misses estrogen as well, and it gets shorter and smaller, which makes it more susceptible to infection. And the most common type of infection is a UTI, or a urinary tract infection. Now, anybody, any age can get a UTI, but postmenopause women make up millions of reoccurring UTIs every single year. And all of those things can be treated with moisturizing with hyaluronic acid and using vaginal estrogen. That is recommended by the menopause societies as well as the Canadian Urological Association.
Okay. What about symptoms of like having to go to the bathroom
Yes.
more or maybe incontinence? Like, is that kind of in the
It
same
is.
subject? Okay.
Yeah. So when estrogen declines, it also impacts our bladder health as well. And unfortunately, we have sort of what's happening physically, and then we have all the noise that happens in society and on social media and things that say on TV ads that say, light bladder leakage. Well, light bladder leakage is incontinence. And incontinence is the number 2 reason why women are admitted to long-term care facilities. Incontinence, if left, could cost us. If I was to be incontinent today, that would cost me, I don't know, in the neighborhood of $1,500 a year. If I live to be 90, that would cost me $50,000 just in incontinence pads, not to mention what it would cost me socially. Like if I stopped going to on my girlfriend getaways because I didn't want them to see that I was using incontinence pads and, and would affect my mental health and all of those things. So I love to back it up to, we have this window of opportunity in midlife to obviously invest in, giving our body back a little bit of the estrogen that we used to make on our own, but to be proactive with things like pelvic floor physiotherapy and knowing that pelvic floor physiotherapists can prevent and treat any issues related to incontinence as well as pelvic organ prolapse. And pelvic organ prolapse is when parts of our body move out of the position that they are supposed to be in. So we can have a bladder prolapse, we can have a uterine prolapse, or we can have a rectal prolapse.
Geez, this is serious stuff. So it's
It
not
is.
just like a little bit of leakage, which I mean, a little bit's too much anyway.
Yeah.
But it's our health. And so you do recommend like pelvic floor PTs?
Do.
Okay.
And I'll share my personal story if you want.
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so I went to a pelvic floor physiotherapist for the first time in 2019, And I went for my community. I went with a video camera and I was like, I'm like, not to show like anything
Yeah.
X-rated, but just so that I could record the conversation and so that I could hopefully motivate women in my community to go as well. And I would say that my incontinence going into that appointment, well, I wasn't even using the word. I have seasonal allergies. I sneeze a lot in the spring. And sometimes sneezing excessively, you know, I would leak a little. But other than that, no issues. I was
Yeah.
going in saying, I'm here. I don't have any symptoms. Look at me. I'm just doing this for everybody else. And I walked out with a diagnosis of a stage 2-3 bladder prolapse and a rectocele, which means that the rectum is bulging into the vagina.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
But that was
So
a shocker.
yeah, so it was a little bit of a shocker, but the messaging is that everything that I do for my pelvic floor from that moment on probably won't correct my prolapse, but it will prevent it. Like I got another 45 years, I hope, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, or 40 anyway. And yeah, so everything that I do will prevent that from getting worse.
I would imagine that women seeking out something like this, I feel like there's probably a lot of shame that goes with that and shame around the menopause conversation as well. Like, why is that?
I have two different answers for that.
Okay.
That's a really good question. And I think that often the first place we go when we ask that question is externally. We say things like the patriarchy, ageism, sexism, racism, even. All of these things exist in our society, and they definitely exist in our medical community. The other answer that I have, and that I've been, well, this is one of the first times that I've been giving this answer publicly.
Okay.
It's because women haven't been talking to one another. Yeah.
I 100% agree.
So, and I think that that is still rampant. And I don't know if it's shame. I don't know really, I think the root cause would be different for everyone if we had a chance to survey them. But I worry because I support a lot of women in the Menopause Chicks community, and I still am worried that women will find a solution. I will point them towards the evidence-based information that they need. I will give them script tips for their next health appointment. They get the solution and they check the box and they go, whew, I'm so glad that I was able to figure that out. Thank you, Shirley. And then I'm like, could you tell the others?
Yeah.
Like, can you take this to your book club? Can you take it to work? Can you take it to your sisters, your friends, your girlfriends? And I don't know that that is happening yet, but I'm really optimistic that we are on the cusp of things like that happening.
Well, I hope so. And I agree with women, not talking to each other about these things. I was having a conversation with someone recently and she brought up menopause and she was just like, "Oh, well, it didn't happen to me. It happened to my friend." And I was just like, "Why are we scared to talk about this?"
I
Like, it's a
know.
normal part of life. We've made it. We're alive and we're all going to go through this. Like, why is there so much shame, you know?
Well, probably, one of the reasons why the shame exists is because we haven't had the opposite conversation. I don't know that we've shone a light on enough older women yet in society that says, by the way, I'm 57. I'm the smartest I have ever been today. I am standing on stages and I'm calling myself wise and beautiful and confident. I didn't use those adjectives in my 30s or in my 40s. And so if we can show the positives of growing older while we are still having a conversation about menopause, I think that that will definitely create more celebration and hopefully more positive conversation. And by the way, I mean, I always if you have your period longer, I always say, well, that's great because the longer you produce estrogen and progesterone, the better it is for your bones and your
Mm-hmm.
vagina. And so I remind women of that. But at the same time, we also have a lot of other things to celebrate. saying goodbye to bleeding sometimes is like, it's a welcome point in our reproductive timeline. Like we're inventing a cupcake or a mocktail that
Yeah.
day, right? And saying goodbye to contraception
Yep.
at the same time that maybe we're saying goodbye to children in the house and maybe new partners or old, rekindling with old partners or changing careers, or like women are doing a lot of new things at 50.
And it's exciting. And you
Yeah.
do get to that point. Like I'm way more comfortable with myself and confident than I was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that it's going to be even better when I'm in my 50s. And it's like, why do we have this so much shame about getting older? Like talking about it. But you mentioned estrogen just now, like how important it is for our bodies. So this isn't just a female hormone. Like it really does a lot for the entire body. Could you just give some examples of like where estrogen has effect that maybe we don't know that it does?
Sure. Okay, so it is just a female hormone.
Or you know what I
Yep.
mean? Not just like
No,
something
I
that
know.
we talk
It's
about
not
with
just it's
periods
not
and
just a sex hormone,
yeah,
a
yes, that's
reproductive
what I
hormone.
meant.
So we have estrogen, we have hormone receptors in every part of our body. And I love that you're asking this question because it is so, when we talk about estrogen and progesterone, it's so often referred to as like the reproductive, the making of the egg, the shedding of the uterine lining, and so on. And estrogen, when cycles are regular, protects our heart. I mean, it has hundreds of jobs, but it protects our heart and it protects our brain, protects our bones, protects our vagina. It's our juicy hormone. So it's good for our skin and our eyes and everything. And progesterone is the hormone that's produced in the second half of our cycle. And it also has hundreds of roles and responsibilities, but it manages our mood and our sleep. It regulates bleeding. It's also a keen investment in our brain health and in our
Mm.
bone health. And so there's a natural, as I say that, there's probably a natural assumption that, well, then hormone therapy must protect my brain or, protect my heart. And I get that everyone would want to make that assumption. And I will just clarify that we don't yet have evidence that hormone therapy should be prescribed for the prevention of heart disease or brain decline. But one can assume that if we give our body back a little bit of what it used to make on its own, that we're also taking a little bit of extra care of those body parts as well.
And like going back to what you said earlier, that's not the only thing. Like we have to pay attention to sleep. And if we're
Yeah.
talking about bone health, strength training, I mean, that's huge for us, or
Yeah,
diet. And it's not just one thing.
yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Um, Eat, move, and sleep are big buckets. But, as we get to certain ages, we realize that what we used to be able to tolerate, we can no longer tolerate. And that might include, staying up late and getting like, functioning on 3 hours sleep. It might include alcohol tolerance, which, that could be a whole other podcast because alcohol regulations have changed. And I think it's really important that women understand that. So yeah,
I
no more, no more late night drive-throughs.
It's funny. I think of it as like the older we get, this margin of error is just getting
Um,
smaller and smaller. Even if I have too much sugar one day, I
yeah,
literally feel like I'm hungover. It's weird.
you are.
But the alcohol, I have talked about alcohol before on this
Okay.
podcast. And I actually, so I'm in the US. I did a lecture on substance use in Canada. And so I had to research Canadian rules or recommendations around alcohol, which I wish the US would take your lead because our rules or whatever make no sense when we're talking about the actual research. And I feel like you guys are much more on target with
Well,
that.
and it's fairly new. So it was January 2023 when Canada announced new guidelines for alcohol consumption for women. And instead of 2 per day, it's 2 per week.
Yeah. If that,
Um,
right?
which, if that, I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully less than that. But what that did for me is I haven't gone alcohol free, but since interviewing a few experts and really just being aware of it, I have started counting.
Mm.
Right. So,
Yeah.
how you kind of got your headspace into, whether you walk 10,000 steps a day or not, or whatever. But like, either you're aware or you're not. And
Hmm.
I'm now aware of alcohol consumption, and I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's like counting your calories. Like you don't really know until you start tracking it, and then you're like, "Oh, okay." But I personally don't drink, but I can't imagine the effect of hot flashes. I mean, alcohol directly will increase the intensity of hot flashes, and I'm just like, "Oh, I'm just glad that I don't really have to worry about at least that part."
I don't know about the science behind that. I don't know about that. I mean, there's a lot of anecdotal messaging around avoid spicy foods, avoid alcohol, avoid caffeine when it comes to vasomotor symptoms. None of those things are the root cause of vasomotor symptoms.
Yeah, they were. I just read one study where they linked the vasodilation that comes from drinking
Um,
alcohol, meaning more blood, meaning more heat, hot flashes. So I just thought
yeah,
it was interesting.
yeah,
Um, Back to menopause. What is it? Menopause hormone therapy. How
yes.
does testosterone fit into that?
Yeah, great question. So testosterone is not a male hormone, and not only a male hormone, not only a sex hormone. Women make it too. Our ovaries make testosterone, and it is responsible for our sex drive, but it's responsible for other things too, like our confidence, which is kind of cool to know.
Hmm.
But testosterone therapy for women is not approved in North America yet. We will see it. I'm sure that I will be alive to see it. So that's good for individuals who are interested, curious, and not currently having it prescribed. But that said, it can be prescribed in an off-label format. And if you don't know, if you're not familiar with off-label prescribing, it essentially means that something can be prescribed for something in addition to the original intention, like a SSRI, an antidepressant, could be prescribed for the treatment of vasomotor symptoms.
Hmm, okay. And why do you think testosterone isn't approved yet?
Oh, that question's easy. Less than 12% of all health research has been designated to women's health. And when I say women's health, I mean menstruation, um, everything, heart health, bone health, um, PMDD, like everything is less than 12%. So testosterone has been way down on the list.
Yeah, I remember I saw a post about this topic, and it was like it wasn't until 1993 that women were even included in trials and medical studies and stuff. And we were just considered like a smaller man
I know.
with these things. It's crazy.
Yes, it's totally crazy. Now, the International Menopause Society, about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe it's five now, they wrote a global position paper on testosterone. You can find that at the International Menopause Society website. So, and I know it's going to happen.
I can say from personal experience, I got started on the estrogen patch like over a year ago, and that helped with some things, but I was definitely still not right. And it took me several clinics here in the US, and I finally found someone who listened and listened to my symptoms and didn't just look at my blood work and started me on testosterone therapy. And I feel almost back to normal and very quickly. And I was just like,
Wow.
why is this so hard? Why is it so? It's like pulling teeth, trying to get someone to talk about it, let alone give it to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is so complex because you don't want anyone prescribing you something that they don't have education, experience, and expertise in.
Yeah,
So it takes work
it does a lot of
to
work.
build,
And it's
build a health team that, yeah,
the only person that's going to advocate for yourself is you. And if you,
100%.
yeah, if you go to a doctor and you get answers that you don't like, keep looking. Like it's definitely worth it. Um, what if somebody is not even in the realm of like perimenopause or anything, if they're younger, is there anything they can do proactively to kind of help this transition go smoother so it's not like hitting you like a ton of bricks?
Yeah, so there's really no guarantee because all of us are individual, but I have a 21-year-old daughter and she was diagnosed with PCOS at 17. And, it was a great learning experience and insights into your question, because first she came to me and said, I've got a period in a long time. And I was like, you're an athlete. Don't worry about it. I hear that happens a lot. And I was dismissing her.
Mm.
She was telling me, about a health concern, and I was dismissing. And then I course corrected really quickly. And I realized what we do now could impact her future fertility.
Mm.
And so, we surrounded her by the health team and figured all of that out. And so for younger women, first of all, I think it's amazing that you have these conversations, that you talk about it with your friends, your circle, and your health team. Learning how your cycle works. I confess I had a cycle for many years and didn't even know what was happening or why. So wasn't that in tune with my body. I had other people say, I know when I ovulate. And I'm like, you do?
You're like, I don't even know that.
Yeah, I was just so out of touch. So all of that is really important. And then there is a lot more dialogue now happening about PCOS and PMDD, and just speaking up. You've touched on this before, but how we eat, move, sleep, and manage stress. And especially, well, not especially, but the stress part is key, because cortisol is our stress hormone. And cortisol can really influence how the ovaries work. So if you are not sleeping well, and then your cortisol spikes at the wrong time of day, and then maybe that, influences how estrogen and progesterone are produced in your body, and you are trying to conceive, all of that could be missing each other. And so take care of yourself. Put your own name at the top of the to-do list.
Which is hard for a lot of people, especially women, I feel like. But it's
It,
important. No one else is going to do it.
in the supplement question, there's so many options and so much messaging that comes to us. So I really encourage members to ask yourself what your body is missing. If you are missing vitamin D, if you are missing iron, if you are missing magnesium, those are and omega-3s. Those are things that are sometimes hard for us to get through diet alone.
Mm-hmm.
So you might want to supplement that. But if you see something on the shelf that's at eye level that screams, magic wand, and you turn it around and it says proprietary blend of rhubarb extract, and you ask yourself, am I missing rhubarb extract right now? And the answer is no, then you could probably save your money.
Okay. Well, in your ebook too, I feel like that's a really good resource, because you kind of list out, the supplements and what they do for you. And so yeah, that's a great resource. Speaking of resources, which ones do you have for people who want to learn more, or who maybe want to connect with you?
Yeah, so menopausechicks.com is my website, at menopausechicks on Instagram, and the private Menopause Chicks community, which is a learning platform. It's not like other Facebook groups. We don't do any doctor bashing or partner bashing or anything like that. It's just Q&A and quality education that's evidence-based, is at menopausecommunity.com.
Okay, great. I remember when I was first feeling these symptoms, last year, I signed up for these Reddit groups and then some Facebook groups on menopause. And I have to say, there was so much negativity in all of that, and just, there wasn't any solutions. And I was like, I don't want to complain. I just want to figure out what's going on. So it sounds like that's what your group does.
It has to. I mean,
Yeah.
Women, if 77% of women have questions about their midlife health, I believe that 100% of us deserve quality answers. And I just happen to do that inside a Facebook group, but there's lots of ways in which we can access that information so that we can feel confident making decisions for ourselves.
Well, I think what you're doing is great. I love that you have all of these resources out there for people. And thank you so much for your time today, Shirley. I'll make sure to put all of your contact information down in the show notes. And also, thank you for creating such great content on Instagram. I've learned a lot from you.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been fun.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you next time.